"You're not suited for tight collaboration," Spencer said icily, his gaze sharpening as he settled back into his leather executive chair. "Perhaps your talents would be better appreciated at another firm." I sat opposite him in his expansive corner office, watching as he delivered what he surely believed was a crushing pronouncement. The afternoon sun poured through the panoramic windows behind him, stretching long, stark shadows across his polished ebony desk. I could make out the low drone of the ventilation system and the muffled sounds of my colleagues down the hall, blissfully ignorant that their department head was in the process of making the most significant misjudgment of his career. "I see," I responded, my voice even, despite the fury simmering beneath my calm exterior. "Should I begin clearing out my workspace now?" Spencer's eyebrows lifted a fraction. He had clearly anticipated supplication, perhaps even tears, but certainly not this measured reply. "Yes, I believe that would be for the best. Our Human Resources Department will be in touch regarding your final administrative details." I gave a slight nod and rose to my feet, adjusting the lapels of my dark gray blazer. "Of course. Thank you for the opportunity you provided here, Spencer." As I made my way to the door, I could feel his stare fixed on my back. He was likely pondering why I wasn't pleading for my position, why I wasn't vowing to become a more cooperative team member if he'd only reconsider. What Spencer didn't realize was that I had been methodically preparing for this exact moment for months. My name is Lindsay Renaud, and until 15 minutes ago, I held the position of Senior Marketing Analyst at Ethelred Geomatics in Bellevue, Washington. At 34, I had ascended from an entry-level role to spearheading the most productive team within our entire department. My strategic campaigns had secured over $2 million in new contracts this year alone, and my team had consistently surpassed all of our quarterly goals. None of that, however, was of any consequence to Spencer anymore. Not since I had politely turned down his third request for dinner in as many weeks. I walked through the open plan office where my team was seated, each of them engrossed in their work on the major product launch we had been developing for months. Annalise glanced up from her screen as I approached her desk. "Hey, Lindsay, are we still confirmed for the client pitch tomorrow?" she asked, her cheerful smile wavering as she registered my expression. "Actually, you'll have to sync up with Spencer about that," I said quietly. "I won't be in tomorrow." The look of pure confusion in her eyes was agonizing. My team had placed their faith in me, depended on me, and now they were being abandoned to navigate the consequences of Spencer's personal agenda. But there was nothing more I could do for them in that moment, other than to ensure that this sort of thing would never happen to another person in this company. 6 months prior, I had been ecstatic to accept a position at Ethelred Geomatics. The firm possessed an impeccable reputation in the civil engineering world, with a portfolio ranging from state-of-the-art residential communities to significant infrastructure undertakings. For someone with my passion for marketing within the technical sectors, it had seemed like a dream come true. Spencer had presented himself as the consummate professional throughout my interview process. At 42, he was a married man with 2 teenage daughters and had been a fixture at the company for 8 years. He spoke with great passion about the department's aspirations and appeared genuinely taken with my expertise in technical marketing. I felt a sense of optimism about working under his direction. The initial few months were as promising as I had hoped. My team and I rolled out a new, comprehensive digital marketing strategy that boosted our lead generation by 35%. I put in place advanced tracking systems that provided us with unprecedented clarity on our key demographics. Spencer was effusive in his public praise of my contributions and even put my name forward for a company-wide award for innovation. But at some point around the 4-month mark, the atmosphere began to change. It started almost imperceptibly. Spencer would find reasons to linger at my desk for too long while we discussed projects. He started inquiring about my personal time and making remarks about my clothing. "You look lovely today, Lindsay," became a frequent opening, always paired with a smile that sent an uncomfortable shiver through me. I tried to dismiss it at first, telling myself he was merely being friendly, that I was misinterpreting benign comments. I had encountered overly familiar managers before, and was adept at upholding professional limits without stirring up conflict. The first dinner request occurred on a Friday afternoon in my 5th month. Spencer materialized at my desk just as I was getting ready to leave for the day. "Exceptional work on the Maddox account presentation," he said, settling on the corner of my desk. "What do you say we celebrate with a nice dinner tonight? I know a fantastic Italian spot downtown." I kept my tone light, but my answer firm. "That's very thoughtful of you, but I already have plans this evening. Thank you, though." His smile faltered for a heartbeat before snapping back into place. "Of course. Perhaps some other time." I had hoped that would be the end of it. I was mistaken. The invitations grew more persistent, invariably disguised as work-related celebrations or team-building exercises. Whenever I declined, Spencer's attitude would subtly sour. He grew more critical of my work, nitpicking decisions he had previously lauded. He began to call for impromptu meetings that stretched late into the evening, after which he would propose continuing the discussion over a meal. My performance metrics remained outstanding, but I could feel the shift in our professional relationship. Spencer was no longer viewing me as a respected colleague. He was now seeing me as a personal conquest. The professional esteem I had dedicated myself to building was dissolving, being replaced by an undercurrent that made me profoundly uneasy. By the 6th month, I was certain I had to take steps to shield myself. That's when I began recording our interactions. The simple recording application on my phone became my safeguard. Every exchange with Spencer was captured, time-stamped, and backed up securely to a cloud server. I told myself it was an overreaction, that I would likely never need the files, but a deep-seated instinct was screaming that there was something fundamentally wrong with the situation. The pivotal moment arrived 3 weeks ago, during my quarterly performance review. Spencer had requested my presence in his office to go over my annual evaluation, which I expected to be a routine discussion about my performance and objectives for the coming year. "Your metrics are excellent, as usual," Spencer noted, glancing through the report on his monitor. "The team really flourishes under your leadership style." "Thank you," I said, feeling a slight sense of relief. Perhaps I had been overanalyzing things. Maybe we could return to a normal, professional dynamic. "In fact," Spencer went on, swiveling in his chair to face me with that now familiar smile, "I believe it's time we talked about your future with us. There could be a significant promotion on the horizon in the next quarter." My heart leaped with genuine excitement. A promotion would mean greater responsibilities, a better salary, and the validation of all the effort I had poured into my career. That sounds wonderful. What would the new role involve? Spencer leaned forward, resting his elbows on his desk. "Well, that's contingent on just how dedicated you are to becoming a part of the leadership team. It demands a great deal of collaboration, of building relationships, occasionally working very closely together, beyond standard office hours." The way he stressed "closely together" sent a chill down my spine. I maintained a neutral expression, but internally, warning sirens were blaring. "Of course," I said cautiously, "I'm always prepared to invest extra time and effort for critical projects." "Excellent." Spencer's smile broadened. "Why don't we begin with dinner this Friday? We can delve into the specifics of the position, perhaps chat about your long-term career ambitions. I was thinking of somewhere special, maybe that Parisian bistro on Bellevue Way." There it was, the unspoken exchange I had been dreading. A promotion was being dangled before me like a prize, its availability tied to my willingness to erase the line between my professional and personal life. "I appreciate the consideration," I stated, my voice holding firm despite my racing pulse. but I make it a policy to keep business discussions within the office. Perhaps we could set up a formal meeting next week to review the details." Spencer's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. "Lindsay, successful people in this field know that relationships are key. Networking, fostering trust, demonstrating your commitment to the team. These things don't just happen inside conference rooms." "I understand that," I countered, "but I am not comfortable with dinner meetings. I hope you can respect that personal boundary." The silence hung between us for what felt like an eternity. Spencer's jaw muscle clenched, and when he finally spoke, his voice was devoid of all its previous warmth. "I see. Well, in that case, we may need to reconsider your suitability for leadership roles here." That was the instant I knew my position was in jeopardy. The backlash was swift and immediate. Spencer began cutting me out of high-level strategy sessions that I had previously been integral to. Critical emails that should have included me were mysteriously routed to other team members. Projects that I had managed for months were abruptly reassigned with no explanation. My team picked up on the changes, though they couldn't pinpoint the reason. Annalise approached me one afternoon, her brow creased with worry. "Lindsay, is everything all right? Spencer mentioned he's now handling the Caspian Dynamics presentation next week. I was sure that was your project." I managed a reassuring smile, unwilling to pull my team into the toxic mess. Just a bit of a reshuffle in responsibilities, nothing to be concerned about. But in private, I was documenting everything. Every snub, every reassignment, every backhanded remark was recorded and logged. I also began delving into employment law, spending my evenings reading up on hostile work environments and cases of retaliation. The second dinner request came 2 weeks later, just after I had successfully secured a major deal with a new client. Spencer called me into his office, supposedly to offer his congratulations on the victory. "Outstanding work on the Obsidian Ridge contract," he said, though his tone was flat and lacked any real enthusiasm. "That's precisely the kind of initiative that makes someone promotion material." Here we go again, I thought, discreetly activating the recording app on my phone. "Thank you," I replied. The team put a great deal of effort into that proposal. They did, but true leadership comes from the top. Speaking of which, I think it's high time we had that dinner conversation about your future with the company. How does tomorrow night sound? I had rehearsed this response in my mind countless times. "I appreciate your continued interest in my professional growth, Spencer, but, as I've stated before, I prefer to keep business matters in the office. Perhaps we could arrange a formal meeting with human resources present to go over advancement opportunities." The suggestion of bringing HR into the discussion was intentional. I wanted to gauge his reaction to the idea of external oversight. Spencer's composure shattered, his face became flushed, and his voice turned sharp and cold. "Lindsay, I'm starting to believe you don't grasp how things are done here. This company is built on team players, on people who are prepared to go the extra mile to cultivate relationships. If you're not interested in being a part of that culture, then maybe you should rethink your career path." "I am deeply committed to my career," I said with resolve. "I simply believe in upholding professional boundaries." "Professional boundaries?" Spencer echoed, his tone laced with derision. "That's a peculiar way of describing a lack of cooperation." The conversation ended there, but I could see the gears turning in Spencer's mind. He was finished with pretense. The gloves were about to come off. Over the following weeks, my work environment grew increasingly hostile. Spencer started micromanaging every single aspect of my duties, demanding exhaustive reports on tasks that had never required such scrutiny before. He would publicly criticize presentations that had previously been praised, finding fault with minor details in formatting and phrasing that he himself had approved only days earlier. The most egregious incident took place during a client meeting with Bellevue Civic Works. I had invested weeks in crafting a comprehensive marketing plan for their new housing development, but as we sat down with their leadership, Spencer contradicted me at every opportunity. "What Lindsay is suggesting is certainly imaginative," he said, with a condescending smile. "But I believe we need to adopt a more conventional strategy. Allow me to walk you through some alternative approaches." He then proceeded to present a diluted, inferior version of my own proposal, claiming my research and insights as his own. The clients were visibly confused by the conflicting messages, and I could feel our professional credibility eroding with every word he spoke. After the meeting, I confronted Spencer in private. What just transpired in there was unprofessional and detrimental to our relationship with the client. Spencer's response was ice cold. What transpired in there was leadership. Maybe if you spent less time fixating on boundaries and more time acting like a team player, you would grasp the difference. That evening, I contacted my legal counsel. Morgan DeVries was a specialist in employment law. I had been referred to her by a former associate who had navigated a similar ordeal at her last company. When I called her firm, her assistant set up a meeting for the next day. Morgan's office was situated in downtown Bellevue, occupying the 15th floor of a modern glass skyscraper. She was a woman in her 50s, with intelligent eyes and an aura of competence that immediately set me at ease. After I laid out my situation and played several of the most incriminating recordings for her, she leaned back in her chair, a grim expression on her face. "You have done absolutely the right thing by documenting all of this," she affirmed. "These recordings unequivocally demonstrate a pattern of harassment and subsequent retaliation. The fact that he is linking your job security to personal dinner dates is a textbook example of quid pro quo harassment." "What are my options?" I asked, a mix of relief and anxiety washing over me. "We have a few potential routes," Morgan detailed. "You could file an official complaint with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, attempt an internal resolution through your company's HR department, or we can get ready for litigation should the situation escalate. What would you advise?" Morgan weighed the question carefully. "Considering your supervisor has already started to retaliate against you professionally, I anticipate the situation will only get worse. My recommendation is to prepare for every possibility while we work to protect your current role for as long as we can." She was right, of course. When I went back to work the next day, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Spencer barely looked at me during our morning department huddle, and when he did speak to me, his tone was cutting and dismissive. The third dinner invitation was extended exactly 1 week later, and it would be the final straw. I was working late, attempting to get caught up on projects that Spencer had needlessly complicated with his new micromanagement tactics. The office was mostly deserted, with only a handful of other dedicated employees still at their desks. When Spencer showed up at my workstation at 7 p.m., I knew instantly what was coming. "Still at it, Lindsay? That's real dedication," he commented, his tone implying he found my work ethic more irritating than admirable. "Just finalizing the quarterly reports," I said, my eyes fixed on my monitor. "You know, this reminds me, we still haven't had that dinner conversation about your future. Third time's the charm, isn't it? Why don't we head out now and get a bite at that chop house on Main Street?" This time, I looked up and met his gaze head-on. "Spencer, I have been perfectly clear that I am not interested in dinner meetings. I would prefer to discuss my career advancement through official company channels." His amiable mask shattered. "Official channels," he repeated with a contemptuous laugh. "Do you have any clue how this industry actually operates? Do you think successful people advance by hiding behind HR policies and procedures? I think successful people advance through competence and hard work," I answered coolly, though my heart was pounding. Spencer leaned down, planting his hands on my desk and bringing his face uncomfortably close to mine. "Let me be absolutely clear. Lindsay, your attitude problem is negatively impacting this team's morale and the department's overall productivity. If you can't see fit to adjust your approach to collaboration, you may soon find that your skills are not as indispensable here as you seem to believe. The threat was now explicit, and I had every word of it recorded. I understand, I said softly, but what Spencer didn't understand was that he had just given me everything I needed to bring him down. The final confrontation unfolded on a Friday afternoon, precisely 3 weeks after my initial consultation with Morgan DeVries. I had used those weeks to meticulously log every interaction, every snub, and every professional roadblock that could be directly linked to my refusal to have dinner with Spencer. My team's morale was plummeting under his increasingly arbitrary leadership. He had started to question their work as well, in an apparent attempt to build a case that my attitude problem was contaminating the entire department. Annalise had confided in me that she was actively looking for a new job, and 2 of my other team members had voiced similar sentiments. The breaking point arrived when Spencer announced that he was reassigning the Maddox Industries account, my largest client and most successful project, to Liam, a junior analyst who had been with the firm for less than 6 months. I think Liam could really benefit from the exposure to high-level client relations, Spencer declared during our team meeting, as if the decision were completely logical. A heavy silence filled the room. Everyone knew that the Maddox account was incredibly complex and demanded a profound understanding of their industry and unique requirements. Handing it over to Liam wasn't just illogical, it was a move that could seriously harm the client relationship and the company's standing. After the meeting, I requested a private word with Spencer. We moved to his office, and I shut the door behind us, ensuring my phone's recorder was active. Spencer, I need to understand the justification for reassigning the Maddox account, I started. It has taken months to cultivate that client relationship, and they have explicitly asked to continue working with me. Spencer didn't even try to invent a plausible business reason. Lindsay, I have been extraordinarily patient with your attitude, but I am beginning to doubt whether you are truly committed to being a part of this team. And what specifically about my attitude is concerning you? I pressed, maintaining a professional tone. You know precisely what I'm referring to. Your refusal to engage in the kind of relationship building that is fundamental in this business. Your insistence on creating unnecessary barriers between yourself and leadership. He was now openly admitting that his actions were retaliatory, based on my refusal to socialize with him outside of work. Are you saying my professional relationships are expected to extend beyond office hours? I asked, wanting to capture his response on the recording. I'm saying that individuals who want to get ahead in this company must demonstrate a willingness to invest in building trust and rapport with their supervisors. If you're incapable of doing that, then perhaps this is not the right environment for you. The ultimatum had finally been laid bare. Comply with his inappropriate advances, which he disguised as networking, or endure continued retaliation, designed to eventually force me out. I see, I said evenly, and if I continue to decline these dinner invitations, you will persist in reassigning my projects and undermining my role here. Spencer's face flushed with anger. I'm not undermining anything. I'm trying to manage a department, and that job requires team members who are willing to be team players. If you can't grasp that simple concept, then yes, you might just be happier somewhere else. Understood, I replied. In that case, I will need to consider whether this is the right fit for me. Take all the time you need, Spencer said with a dismissive smirk, but don't take too long. There are plenty of people who would be thrilled to have the opportunities you're so carelessly discarding. I left his office with the certain knowledge that the end was imminent. Spencer had backed himself into a corner, and his next move was entirely predictable. I called Morgan DeVries and told her to get the paperwork ready. The termination came the following Monday morning. "You're not a team player," Spencer said coldly, his eyes narrowing as he leaned back in his executive chair. "Maybe you'd be happier working somewhere else." I smiled to myself as I placed my personal belongings into the cardboard box HR had supplied. My favorite coffee mug, the small succulent that had sat on my desk, the framed photo from my business school graduation, all of it was packed away with deliberate care. "Should I expect my final paycheck to include severance?" I inquired casually, as if we were discussing the weather. Spencer shrugged. "That's a matter for you and Human Resources. I'm sure they will contact you." I stood up, box in my arms, and surveyed the office one last time. My team was watching from their desks, their faces a mixture of confusion and distress. Annalise looked like she was on the verge of tears. "Well, it's been an educational experience," I said to Spencer, offering my hand for a final shake. He paused for a moment before taking it, clearly puzzled as to why I wasn't more distraught. "Good luck, Lindsay." "Thank you," I said. "I have a feeling I won't be needing it." As I walked through the office toward the elevator bank, I took out my phone and sent a short text to Morgan DeVries. "It's done. He terminated me today at 2:30 p.m., exactly as we predicted." Her reply was immediate. "Perfect. I'll file the complaint first thing Monday morning. Are you ready for this?" I stepped into an empty elevator and pressed the button for the ground floor. More than ready. What Spencer didn't know was that I possessed 47 separate recordings of our interactions over the past 4 months. What he didn't know was that I had meticulously documented every instance of retaliation, every professional slight, and every inappropriate remark. What he didn't know was that Morgan DeVries had already drafted a comprehensive 37-page complaint that would be filed concurrently with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission and the Washington State Bureau of Labor and Industries. Most importantly, what Spencer didn't know was that I had spent the last month discreetly connecting with former female employees who had departed the company under vague and suspicious circumstances. The elevator doors opened, and I stepped out into the Bellevue afternoon with a feeling of exhilaration I hadn't experienced in months. Monday morning broke with a storm that Spencer never anticipated. I was sitting in a coffee shop downtown when my phone began vibrating with calls from restricted numbers. I let the first few go to voicemail, but by the 5th call, I decided to pick up. "Lindsay, this is Marcus Holloway from Human Resources at Ethelred. We need to set up a meeting with you as soon as possible to discuss the circumstances of your departure." I took a slow sip of my latte and smiled. "I'm afraid I'm not available for any meetings this week. My attorney has instructed me to direct all further communication through her office." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. "Your attorney?" "Morgan DeVries at DeVries Legal Group. I believe you will be hearing from her very shortly, if you haven't already." I ended the call and opened my email. Morgan had forwarded me a copy of the formal complaint she had filed that morning. It was 37 pages of detailed allegations, substantiated by time-stamped recordings and supporting documentation that painted an undeniable picture of sexual harassment and retaliation. The complaint had also been shared with local employment rights advocates and legal aid organizations. By noon, 3 different journalists had contacted me, requesting interviews about workplace culture in the engineering sector. My phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. "This is Liam from your old team. Spencer just called an emergency all-hands meeting and canceled all client appointments for the rest of the week. What is happening?" I didn't reply, but I couldn't help but smile, knowing the chaos was only just beginning. By Tuesday, the story had been featured in the Seattle Commerce Chronicle. By Wednesday, it was trending across social media platforms with the hashtag GIAS Ethelred Accountability. Spencer had made a single, fatal miscalculation. He had assumed I would simply vanish without a fight. He was about to discover just how profoundly wrong he had been. Morgan called me on Thursday afternoon, with an update that was the perfect culmination of my efforts. Lindsay, I just concluded a call with Ethelred's legal counsel. They want to open discussions about a settlement. The power dynamic had shifted completely. As I thought back on the journey from feeling like a victim to achieving this victory, I understood that sometimes the most effective form of revenge isn't loud or theatrical. It's the quiet, deep satisfaction of watching someone be forced to face the direct consequences of their own actions. Spencer had inadvertently taught me that meticulous documentation and unwavering patience are the most formidable tools one can wield against workplace predators, and that was a lesson I would carry with me into whatever the future held.